But speaking of big name CEOs, strong performing CEOs are getting a raise, but so are many of the rest. I'm not sure which bucket Elon Musk really falls in there. That one I leave up to you. But median compensation rose to $12.4 million for CEOs of S&P 500 companies last year, setting a record for the fourth straight year, even though most delivered negative stock market returns, according to the Wall Street Journal. Guys, the highest paid CEO in 2018 was Discovery CEO David Zaslav, whose pay tripled to $129 million. So what do you make of this list? As we're just looking, Bob Iger's also on that list, and he's been talked about from Abigail Disney as well, an heiress to Disney. She's not on the board, but she's called out Bob Iger's pay. What do you make of how much CEOs are getting paid these days?
I think it's a huge disconnect, especially when, as an average employee, you do not get the same benefit. If you do not perform, you do not make that bonus, you do not get that compensation. But I'm interested, as a head of a company, what is your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, actually, this goes back towards kind of shareholder involvement, and Bob Iger is a really good example of that. Shareholders actually voted against increasing his pay, and board actually went against shareholder voting and continued to increase his salary. I think that's an issue from a governance standpoint, actually. And CEOs should be rewarded for the growth and initiatives. And I don't actually believe that it should just be a reward on growing and increasing stock performance, because that's why Pinterest is increasing revenue and not improving margins. So CEOs, and I think kind of investors in these companies, should take more responsibility along long-term goals versus short-term and assign pay increases to that. And we're not seeing that. And these reports on growth and pay are not reflective of that.
That's kind of, I guess, one of the ESG main focuses, right? Is because there is such a high pressure on CEOs to kind of deliver short-term growth. Even when we look at the Uber IPO, Dara's pay is tied to a valuation of $120 billion. So trying to get there as quick as he can will be a huge windfall for him. But how does that change, really? I mean, unless that's forced.
There's some really interesting initiatives out there that are starting organizations or stock markets called kind of long-term shareholder value and reassigning investments. Large pension plans are getting involved with these policy shifts, putting pressure on asset managers to think longer term versus shorter term. This kind of ongoing analyst reporting needs to shift as well. How can you change revenue and costs in the 3-month period? That is very, very short term.
Yeah.
And again, should be reflected in the CEO's stories or information he's giving to his employees, which goes back to Tesla having pressure to fix itself in 10 months, right? How do you shift long-term growth of a company when you only have 3 months for your next report?
It's very tricky. But I'm not a CEO. You're a CEO, so I'll take your answer for.
Unfortunately, I'm a long-term
only
thinker.
CEO on the panel.
Yeah, so we'll leave that one there. I've got nothing else to add.
I have great supporters that help me think long-term.